At the age of 21, Robert Redford grieved over his son's lifeless body and felt responsible for his actions. The pain of losing Scott to SIDS in 1959 has never fully healed. Still, that was only the start. At age 18, he lost his mother. Cancer took the life of his second son in 2020. Along with his broken heart, he carried secrets that not even his closest co-stars could deny. Just after his funeral, Fonda came clean. You won't believe what she said about their decades-long collaboration. Robert Redford came into this world in Santa Monica, California on August 18, 1936. Both of his parents were born and raised in Austin, Texas. His dad was an accountant for Standard Oil. During the Great Depression, the family had to relocate from Santa Monica to Van Nuys due to their low income. Even more challenging was the fact that his family lived in Venice, yet his father worked in El Segundo. Robert would occasionally move in with his grandpa in Austin to relieve some of the household stress. He developed a lifelong appreciation for nature as a result of his experiences on such expeditions. Polo struck him in 1947 at the tender age of 11. He remained immobile for weeks. It wasn't the worst-case scenario, but it was still painful. Everyone was frightened since this happened before the polio vaccination was available. His mother took him to Yosemite National Park in 1949. 2 years later, his heart sank the moment he laid eyes on the valley. He wanted to do more than simply see it. He wanted to immerse himself in it. Everything for him shifted in that one instant. Robbie became a gang member when he was a teenager. Charges against him for operating a stolen vehicle were dropped after his arrest when he was 16 years old. He had a knack for stealing hubcaps and finding his way into private pools. He nearly died when he leapt from a rooftop once to show the gang what he could do. In Santa Barbara, he would race cars, reaching speeds of up to 90 miles per hour. He experimented with cannabis and hashish, stopped going to school, and began aimlessly wandering. His mother's abrupt death from septicemia at the age of 41 occurred in 1955, when he was 18 years old. Years before, in 1946, after giving birth to stillborn twins, she had developed a blood disease. Tragically, she passed away. The University of Colorado offered him a baseball scholarship, and he had just begun his freshman year in college, but he went into a tailspin once she went. He was expelled from school after just 18 months due to excessive drinking and lack of concentration. Robert has a passion for art and storytelling from a young age. In 1954, he won a school painting contest and was offered a summer position at Disney Studios. However, he quickly became dissatisfied with the monotonous labor and decided to leave. A technician's recommendation that he check out a more intimate studio proved to be sound counsel. His father was completely against his aspirations. In his opinion, Robert was wasting time with his painting, which he referred to as daydreaming. The pain of rejection never left him. After a while, he stopped caring and moved to Paris, where he subsisted only on water, bread, and cheese. He lived the life of a starving artist while participating in student protests. Coming of age in 1955, he traversed Europe via hitchhiking. To make ends meet, he sketched naked models and street portraits in exchange for food. He slept under the mattresses of his fellow students in Florence and Paris at youth hosts. In Cannes, he met a French woman who owned a little business and slept in a sleeping bag beneath the pier. The woman was 20 years older than him. She took him in and provided him with guidance that stayed with him. Lift your chin up. Look at the sun. That one sentence was all it took to lift him out of his sadness. Upon his 1957 return to the United States, he commenced his art studies at Brooklyn's Pratt Institute. However, Robert lost it after a lecturer severely critiqued his work, claiming it lacked originality. The anguish of losing his mother had already driven him to drink excessively, and he continued to descend into alcoholism. He abandoned his studies at Pratt and worked in the oil fields and whatever odd jobs he could find. There was a terrible period in his life when this happened, and it almost derailed his future. In Las Vegas, on August 9, 1958, at the age of 22, he secretly wed Lola Van Wagen, who was 19 years old. They borrowed a car to go home because they only had $300. He proposed to Lola, a Mormon from Utah who had been a student at Stanford before she dropped out to be with him. Because Robert wasn't religious and didn't have a steady career, her family was extremely angry with him. On September 12th, at her grandmother's house in Provo, they had another ceremony to settle things down. The family's already tense dynamic was exacerbated by Lola's pregnancy. Nevertheless, they overcame all obstacles and settled in New York City to have a family. Scott was born to them on September 1st, 1959. His death from acid poisoning occurred just 2.5 months later, on November 17th. Bobby was 21 years old, and Lola was 21. The heartbreak caught them entirely off guard. Frustrated by their lack of comprehension, they placed the responsibility on themselves. Even after all these years, Robert still thinks that leaves an indelible mark. For decades, he was troubled by the fact that it almost ended their marriage. Cash was scarce in the 50s. Despite his aspirations to join the American Academy of Dramatic Arts for acting, Robert worked as a gas station attendant, milk truck driver, carpenter, and shop assistant. A cramped New York City apartment was his home with Lola. Everyone from fellow students to teachers made fun of him at the academy. To them, he was nothing more than a lovely face. He was completely disregarded. His insecurity stemmed from his superb looks, which would later propel him to stardom. However, he was almost shattered by the rejection at that same time. When he made his Broadway debut in 1959's Tall Story, he was finally breaking through. Even though he didn't receive any screen credit, he did act in the film adaptation. As a spoiled stepson, he made an appearance in a Perry Mason episode in 1960. 8 television roles were his in that year. His role as a disturbed young guy was featured on one of the series, Rescue 8. He was nominated for an Emmy in 1962 for his performance in Charlie Pond's The Voice. On the psychiatric show Breaking Point in 1963, he made his final television appearance in decades. His early assignments gave him the experience, confidence, and recognition he needed to launch his career. Now we're in 1961. He was the lead actor in Sunday in New York, a comedy that lasted for 188 performances on Broadway. Although it initially lost money, it eventually provided Robert something much more significant. This proved to the producers that he had comedic chops. He was able to land barefoot in the park later on thanks to that. Then, in due time, Sundance Kid and Butch Cassidy. Robert was a TV fixture from 1960 to 1963. A plethora of shows featuring him include Naked City, Route 66, The Twilight Zone, Dr. Kildare, Maverick, and The Untouchables. With each one, his range expanded. It was already too late for him to quit his day job and devote himself full-time to filmmaking. However, getting there was no picnic. Rather than propelling Robert Redford to stardom, his debut feature almost doomed him. He made a cameo appearance in the 1962 low-budget Korean war flick War Hunt, which failed to garner any attention. After almost making Redford doubt everything, the picture failed to even earn $100,000 at the box office and vanished from theaters. However, his life would never be the same after what transpired on site. That he crossed paths with Sidney Pollack. He would go on to form one of the most consequential collaborations of his career out of that casual acquaintance. Pollack went on to helm 7 feature films starring Redford, including Out of Africa and The Way We Were. What seemed like a setback was really the start of something monumental. In 1965, Inside Daisy Clover was released. In the role of Wade Lewis, Redford starred opposite Natalie Wood, an individual who, in the initial novel, came out as gay. That was unpopular in Hollywood, and Redford wasn't exactly thrilled about it either. He was adamant about not portraying the character as gay. Wade should also demonstrate interest in women, in his opinion. So rather than saying it explicitly, the film implied that he was gay. Even yet, for a budding celebrity in the 60s, this was risky and daring. His career may have been ruined with just one slip-up. His reward was a Golden Globe. After taking that chance, people began to take him seriously. But Redford did something in 1967 that he would come to regret for a long time. The opportunity to audition for The Graduate was extended to him by director Mike Nichols. That part may have been once in a lifetime. However, Redford hesitated in response to Nichols's question about his familiarity with female rejection. This led him to the realization that, in fact, he hadn't. Nichols learned everything from that response. To play Benjamin Braddock, Redford was too self-assured, too gorgeous, and too laid back. The role was cast by Dustin Hoffman, who went on to earn over $100 million globally. In hindsight, Redford would list declining the part as a major regret of his career. Everything changed in 1969, just 2 years later, when Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid were involved. Paul Newman co-starred with Redford as the Sundance Kid. It wasn't a picnic, though, getting there. He was to be given secondary character status by the studio. Redford put up a fight. He insisted on sharing the spotlight with Newman. Such a danger was enormous. It was effective, but he had not yet become famous. With $12.3 million, the picture surpassed all previous films in terms of box office receipts for the year. Redford became a household name as a result, and never again had to compete for lead roles. He also made another daring move that year. In Utah, he purchased 2,600 acres of mountainous terrain. He paid around $500 acre for the property, which had a little ski resort named Temp Haven on it. However, Redford has no interest in yet another tourist trap. He was urged by investors to construct condos and hotels. No, he declined. He was opposed to developing the land for his own benefit. His financial stability was almost destroyed by that choice. Outlays skyrocketed. No development was approved by environmental groups. Money kept slipping out of his Sundance project for years. What began as a near-death experience would become central to Redford's career because he persisted. His film debut was in 1972's The Candidate. Bill McKay, an idealistic lawyer caught up in a Senate election, was played by him. The film was critical of more than simply politicians. It showed that the system can eat away at even the best intentions. Obsessiveness consumed Redford behind the scenes. The script was constantly changing, even in the middle of a scene. The director and screenplay were driven mad by him, yet the end result felt authentic. His role in Jeremiah Johnson was also that year. Many scenes were filmed in the snow-covered Utah highlands during real snowstorms. Spectators could sense the icy air. Loneliness was palpable to them. The movie made $44.7 million on its $3.1 million budget. Among the year's top earners, it ranked 7th. There was actual suffering in every scene. Next, in 1973, The Way We Were was released. In a love story spanning decades, Redford co-starred with Barbara Streisand. Streisand persuaded him to play the role despite his disapproval of the character's depth. Rumors circulated as she became completely enamored with him. Redford donned 2 sports bras when they were on their date. For the sake of modesty, he also suggested that she wear a bikini. In fact, he flat-out refused to say lines that he felt betrayed his character. However, a film that moved people all around the world was behind the strange requests. However, Redford did something unexpected in 1980. He helmed the subdued family drama, Ordinary People. It gained $90 million from a $6.2 million investment. Best Picture and Best Director went to Redford. Among the 4 Oscars it won, this was his very first film as a director. Little did anyone know that in 1959, Redford had tragically lost his own young son. He carried the anguish with him forever. He dumped it all into the movie. Roger Ebert and other critics praised it as profoundly affecting. Viewers experienced an emotion not seen in previous family shows. Mental health was thrust into the limelight, and therapy culture was normalized because to the movie. Redford got back into acting in 1984. Redemption and baseball aspirations were at the heart of it. He devoted nearly a decade to producing the picture. Redford was adamant, even though studios disagreed, that baseball movies would sell seats. He took inspiration from Ted Williams and even wore the number 9 in his honor. Even at 48 years old, he put in a lot of time in the gym to perfect his swing. Just like in the book, the plot was going to come to a tragic finish. Redford had it altered. Optimism was what he sought. It was that last home run that made it famous. Out of Africa came out in 1985, a year after that. Redford and Meryl Streep were the stars of the film, which was directed by his longtime friend Sidney Pollack. At the box office, it peaked at number 1 for the decade. Best Film and Best Director were among its 7 Oscar victories. According to rumors, Streep wore a skimpy top to Pollack's house to demonstrate that she had the necessary charisma to play the role. Production was placed in Kenya, close to the actual Anong Hills. Although the picture did not earn Redford an Academy Award, it did solidify his position among Hollywood's most illustrious actors. A River Runs Through It was directed by Redford in 1992. It marked Brad Pitt's debut as an actor of substance. The film was shot in Montana and was adapted from a story by Norman MacLean. Redford changed settings to heighten the dramatic impact of the landscape. He invested $10 million into the local economy, which was floundering, and spent around $12 million. Extras from the area were recruited. Professional fly fishermen rehearsed the sequences. To further ensure the safety of the real trout, the producers even employed artificial fish. It was more than a film. To the natural world, it was an ode. 2 years down the road, in 1994, Quiz Show was Redford's take on the corruption of television. Scandals involving game shows in the 1950s were the subject of the film. For Redford, television was always a fraud. Play Your Hunch was a part of his acting career when he was struggling. He was offered $75. In its place, he received a fishing pole. That was a defining moment for him. He yearned for the seriousness of a quiz show. Minor historical details preoccupied him. Although there were some dramatic moments, the story's core was based on reality. It was well received by critics and viewers alike, proving that films could still convey real stories. In the background, Redford was also working on a larger project. The same year he received his Academy Award, 1981, he also founded the Sundance Institute. His investment was in the millions. Even though the first festival was a bust, few people showed up. Corporate assistance was crucial to their survival. Sundance contributed $132 million to Utah's GDP by the year 2024. Its status shifted from legendary to delicate. The 1992 premiere of Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs was the catalyst for his career. Many felt the celebration was too homogeneous. Then Redford retreated. The goal, he said, was to provide a voice to those who were underrepresented, and half of the films were directed by women. In addition, Redford became a fervent advocate for environmental causes. In Utah, he opposed highways and power plants. A nonprofit that supports environmental films was co-founded by him. He gave testimony in 2009 before Congress. He was threatened by others. He persisted. In defense of the homeland he cared about, he never gave up. He was the target of flames and a $2 million lawsuit rumor mill. The specifics, however, are yet not known. The one thing that has always been true is that he has utilized his popularity to safeguard a greater cause. Redford wasn't in charge of directing The Last Lions. Derek and Beverly Juber produced that 2011 documentary for National Geographic. Beverly was involved in a risky event in 2017 when a buffalo gored her, but Redford was unrelated. However, due to his staunch advocacy for conservation, he was frequently associated with the cause. Even though he was 77 years old when filming All Is Lost began in 2013, Robert Redford continued to push his body to its limits. There was no stunt duplicate used by him. Every single item was done by him. A boat dragged him below for more than 50 feet. Over and over again, he scaled a 65-foot pole. As the icy water lapped at him, he swam through the nets and ropes. The Virginia Jean, their 39-foot yacht, started to sink into 60 feet of water at one scenario. Redford narrowly evaded drowning as the crew hurriedly evacuated the boat. He endured days and nights of submersion before suffering from excruciating ear infections that irreparably impaired his hearing. Redford swam an hour a day to maintain his fitness, according to the underwater director. But by the end of filming, he had bruises all over his body. After a long separation of 4 years, Redford and Fonda reunited for a fourth and last time in 2017. A very human, slow-moving film, Our Souls at Night, was their feature debut. They portrayed elderly neighbors who began sleeping together in their late 70s. This isn't for love, but rather to stave against isolation. Released by Netflix in September 2017. The filming took place in Colorado from September to November 2016. Heartbreakingly, Fonda was 79 years old and Redford was 81 years old. Critics couldn't stop gushing over how authentic their relationship appeared in the situations. In contrast, the title evoked images of darkness, which led to ridicule in the UK. Netflix flat-out declined to alter it. Redford announced his retirement in 2018. In years, he had lived to 82. He said his goodbyes in The Old Man and the Gun, playing the role of Forrest Tucker, a real-life bank robber who managed to evade capture 17 times. Entertainment Weekly said that Redford had finished acting. Only a few weeks later, he apologized to Variety, saying that he should never have spoken such words aloud, since they detracted from the film. This was followed in 2019 by Avengers Endgame. Briefly, he appeared in a 2012 scene playing the role of Alexander Pierce, shot in secrecy from the end of 2017 till the beginning of 2018. He didn't return to the big screen after that unexpected cameo. The Company You Keep, a political thriller that Redford both directed and starred in 2012, was adapted from a book written in 2003. He played a lawyer who was once a radical, who was now on the run. He was exposed by Shia LaBeouf, who portrayed an intrusive journalist. The film's ensemble was perfect. Juliana Christie, Susan Sarandon, Stanley Tucci, Sam Elliott, and Nick Nolte. Originally, the script was only 80 pages long, according to LaBeouf, but it ballooned during dress rehearsals. Things should not be finalized, according to Redford. The story began to develop on his own. Its worldwide earnings of $14.5 million were significantly higher than its $5.1 million U.S. earnings. Redford surprised everyone with one final visit in March 2025. Even though he had already announced his retirement, he made an appearance on the 1970s set crime drama Dark Winds, which he co-produced with AMC. He co-starred with George R.R. Martin for a brief moment as a prisoner. We filmed for 4 hours. Redford kept silent the entire time. Over and over again, he told the director whatever Chris wanted. In an impromptu joke referencing the long-delayed Game of Thrones book, his character made eye contact with Martin and told him, "George, the whole world's waiting. Make a move." With that sentence, Redford left the screen for good. In spite of all, he was a broken man in his personal life. When he wed Lola Van Wagenen in 1958, they had only $300 between them. Through it all, she was there for him. However, they discreetly divorced in 1985, following 27 years of marriage. As production on the Magro-Beanfield War commenced, Redford's connection with actress Sonia Bra became widely known. In subsequent years, he dated the costume assistant Kathy O'Ear. Lola had been there for him through the worst of times, like when their baby boy Scott died in 1959. His breathing came to a halt in his cradle. Nothing ever got past Redford. The agony, he added, would never leave him. Additional misery followed. James Redford, who was his son and an environmentalist and filmmaker, passed away in October 2020 at the age of 58 due to bile duct cancer. Since he was in his 20s, James has battled liver disease. That decade saw him have 2 transplants. He was diagnosed with cancer in 2019 while awaiting a new transplant. His 32-year-old wife and 2 children were left to mourn his death the following year. Although Redford remained silent, his staff acknowledged that he was suffering privately and devastated. Redford remarried in July 2009. His age was 72. His German artist wife, Sybil Sagers, was perhaps 20 years his junior. At Sundance in the late 90s, they crossed paths. Skiing was her reason for coming. She had no idea who he was. To him, that was the most enjoyable aspect. It wasn't about celebrity that brought them together. As few as 30 people attended their intimate wedding ceremony at a hotel in Hamburg. Concern for the natural world was paramount to their lives. She depicted indigenous people and the natural world in her artwork. He was the vice president of her organization and a supporter of her work. His daughters Shauna and Amy both adopted her as their stepmother. Nevertheless, surprises could be found even inside one's own family. There was a lot of ignorance about Redford's half-brother William. William, who resided distant from Hollywood, was involved in medical research. Redford seldom ever brought him up in conversation. Like most issues pertaining to his family, he avoided drawing attention to that aspect of his life. From a young age, Redford had carried the burden of his anguish. At the age of 18, his mother Martha passed away from septicemia. He had twin sisters who passed very soon after birth, and an uncle who was killed in WW2. The wounds caused by those losses, he claimed, would never completely heal. Scott and Lola had no idea what SIDS was when Scott died as a baby. Like a lot of parents, he was hard on himself. Not even stardom could alleviate that pain. Even though he avoided talking about it, his anxiousness affected his job and love relationships throughout his life. At the age of 89, Robert Redford passed away peacefully on September 16, 2025. He was in the Utah mountains, at his beloved Sundance house. No official cause was given, although it is thought that his years of physical wear and his childhood polio finally got the best of him. In his latter years, he struggled to move. His joints had taken a beating from decades of tennis and horseback riding. He ultimately collapsed at 5 feet and 10 inches, passed away with family and friends by his side. According to his publicist, a family crisis started after his passing. His fortune was estimated to be about $200 million. He amassed $20 million in real estate holdings in Utah, California, and New York, through his acting, directing, and astute real estate decisions. His Sundance empire, however, ran into problems. To Broadreach and Cedar Capital, he had previously sold a portion of it in 2020. His wife and daughters were now bickering over the leftovers, everything associated with the Sundance brand, including intellectual property and land. Prosecutors have predicted that the dispute could drag on for years. Even Hollywood's homage showed old scars. During their scenes outside of Africa, Meryl Streep confessed to having a tremendous crush on him and called him one of the lions. An exception, though, was Jane Fonda's eulogy. According to her, he struggled with females and consistently had a negative attitude during their collaboration. Together, they produced 5 films. According to her, she felt responsible for a long time, until she recognized that he was abusive to most of his female co-stars. She came clean about her feelings for him, but they never materialized. She gushed about how stunning he was in every manner, yet her remarks suggested a deeper, more nuanced truth.